Welcome to the Creative Commons RX podcast. Before diving into this episode, I want to ensure we're all on the same page. This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.
You know, we live in a world that's literally built from the elements. They've helped us create our entire civilization. But what if some of those very same elements have a hidden, dangerous side? Today, we're going to dive deep into the toxicology of heavy metals, how they get into our bodies, what they do once they're inside, and most importantly, how we fight back. Okay, this sounds like the setup for a really weird joke, right? What could possibly connect beer, a nice piece of fish, and a trip to the dentist? Well, this question actually gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today, because these things share a surprising and potentially hazardous connection.
And there it is. That's the answer. They can all be sources of heavy metal exposure. See, heavy metals are this group of elements that are incredibly useful in all sorts of industries, but to us, they can be toxic. So the story of heavy metal poisoning is really a story about our own ingenuity, sometimes creating these totally unintended consequences. So let's get into it. How exactly do we come into contact with these things? Well, our exposure often comes from their many, many uses throughout history, and of course, in our modern lives. And sometimes they pop up in places you would least expect. I mean, just look at how varied these sources are. You've got cobalt, which was famously used back in the 60s to keep the foam on beer nice and stable, and now it's in medical implants because it's so durable. Then there's mercury, used in some dental fillings, but it also builds up in the food chain, which is why we worry about it in seafood. Arsenic is a huge public health crisis in places where it gets into the groundwater. And antimony, it's a key ingredient in our smartphones and batteries. So you see, these things they're all around us.
Okay, so what actually happens when these metals get inside of us? For this, we have to zoom in. I mean, way, way down to the microscopic level, because the real fight is happening inside our very own cells. It's best to think of these metals as tiny saboteurs, and each one has its own unique way of causing absolute chaos. To understand this cellular battle, scientists use the term pathophysiology. Now, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but all it really means is figuring out the poison's battle plan. How does it get in there and just mess up the normal, healthy functions of our cells and organs? Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because you can see their different attack methods right here. Arsenic? Think of it like a spy that gets inside a power plant. It directly gums up the works of enzymes that make ATP, which is the energy that powers our cells. No ATP? No power. The cell just shuts down. Cobalt, on the other hand, it's more like an agent of pure chaos. It creates these super destructive molecules called free radicals that just bounce around inside the cell, damaging everything they touch. It's a process called oxidative stress. With all this disruption happening on the inside, how does the body let us know something is seriously wrong? Well, this is where things get really tricky for doctors. The symptoms of heavy metal poisoning can be all over the place, sometimes looking just like other common illnesses. It makes diagnoses feel like a real-life detective story. Take acute arsenic poisoning, for example. It doesn't whisper, it screams. The symptoms can come on suddenly and violently, with terrible nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea hitting within just hours. And that initial GI distress can kick off a whole cascade of other problems, like cardiac arrhythmias. Basically, your heartbeat goes haywire. It's a very dramatic and loud distress signal from the body. Now let's switch gears to cobalt, because it tells a completely different story. Instead of that immediate gut punch, it can launch a much more targeted attack, specifically on the heart. It causes a condition called cardiomyopathy, which literally means the heart muscle gets weak and diseased. This is what happened in those famous beer drinkers' cardiomyopathy cases we mentioned earlier. So you see, two different metals, two totally different sets of clues. And that's why this quote is so crucial. Because the symptoms are all over the map, a patient's history is often the single most important clue for a doctor. Where do you work? What are your hobbies? What have you eaten recently? Getting the answers to those questions and then combining them with the physical signs and lab tests, that's how you crack the case. So, once a doctor figures it out, how do we fight back? This is where medicine gets really cool, turning to chemistry to launch a strategic counterattack. The goal is to support the body, stop any more poison from getting in, and then actively pull out what's already there. The treatment playbook usually has these 3 main steps. Step 1 is supportive care. That just means managing the symptoms and keeping the body's vital systems like the heart and lungs running. Step 2 is decontamination, basically stopping the source and preventing any more of the poison from being absorbed. And then step 3, this is the really targeted part, chelation therapy. Chelation therapy is just fascinating. The best way to think about it is like using a tiny molecular magnet. Doctors give you a special drug, a chelating agent, that's designed to go into your system and grab onto those toxic metal ions. It binds to them super tightly, wraps them up in a safe little package, and then your body can just get rid of it through your urine. It's incredible. And this table really shows you that you have to use the right magnet for the right metal. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. For example, a drug called DMSA works great for antimony and arsenic. There's an older one, BAL, that's also used for arsenic. But if you have severe cobalt poisoning, nope, you'll likely need a completely different agent, like Ca2-EDTA. It's an incredibly precise chemical mission. So, as we start to wrap this all up, what's the big takeaway? We've talked about the sources, the cellular attacks, the symptoms, and the medical counterattacks. But the most powerful tool we have against all of this doesn't come in a pill or an IV drop. The whole point of this isn't to make you paranoid about every little thing you touch or eat. Not at all. The goal is prevention, and that comes from awareness. Just understanding the potential risks in our environment, in our jobs, or even our hobbies. That is the single most effective way to stay safe. In this case, knowledge really is the best antidote. So, I'll leave you with this question. What hidden elements are shaping your world? For better or for worse, these elements are a fundamental part of our lives. They build our technology, but they can also challenge our biology. And just taking a moment to think about the hidden chemistry that's all around us, well, that's the first step to navigating our incredible elemental world safely.
This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.